After the Second World War, as Europe lay in ruins, many high-ranking Nazis fled in fear, afraid for their lives and terrified that their true crimes would finally be exposed to the world. Some, however, were not able to escape and were forced to hear the full record of their actions read out in court. Karl Hermann Frank was one of those men. Frank was a powerful Nazi official who controlled a large part of the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. It was on this very ground that he showed his worst brutality, ordering massacres, reprisals, and even the destruction of entire villages. In this video, we will see how this man, one of the closest figures to Bucha Reinhard, Heydrich, eventually ended up facing a public execution. If you are interested in dark historical cases like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future videos. Karl Hermann Frank was born in a region that today lies within the Czech Republic. From an early age, his home environment was steeped in German nationalism. His father instilled in him the idea of German superiority, and these beliefs took deep root in his mind. During the First World War, Frank tried to join the Austro-Hungarian army, but he was rejected because he was blind in one eye. With his dream of fighting at the front destroyed, he began studying law in Prague. In reality, though, his path was shifting away from books and more towards politics and extremism. As the Nazi movement rose in the 1920s, Frank became an enthusiastic supporter. He joined the Nazi Party in 1923. A few years later, he opened a bookshop that functioned as a propaganda center, distributing Nazi literature and extremist material. This helped him gain influence among local German communities. Frank's focus centered on one issue: the Sudetenland, the part of Czechoslovakia where many ethnic Germans lived. He believed that this territory should belong to the German Reich. To pursue this goal, he played a central role in building Sudeten German organizations. These efforts led to the creation of the Sudeten German Homeland Front, and later, a political party. By 1935, Frank had become one of the leading figures in Sudeten German politics. He became deputy leader and also a member of the Czech parliament. It was deeply ironic that a man intent on breaking Czechoslovakia apart was working from inside its political system. Once the Second World War began, Germany turned Bohemia and Moravia into a protectorate. After 1939, Frank was appointed Secretary of State there. In this role, he gained control over large parts of the Gestapo, the security services, and the police. That Frank used this power to crush dissidents and suppress the Czech population. Anyone who spoke out against Nazi rule or was suspected of ties to the resistance risked arrest or elimination. Over time, Frank's role shifted from that of a politician to a symbol of terror. Yet he wanted more. Frank aimed for the top position of Reich Protector. At that time, the post was held by Konstantin von Neurath, whom Frank considered too soft. He tried to persuade Berlin that the protectorate needed a much harder line. Hitler removed von Neurath, but Frank's dreams collapsed when another man took the position, a figure already infamous across Europe for his cruelty. Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich was appointed the new ruler of Bohemia and Moravia, and with him the character of the protectorate grew even darker. Already a key architect of the Holocaust, he now extended his brutal methods to the Czech lands. Frank and Heydrich shared very similar thinking: extreme Nazism, racial policies, and rule through fear. Together, they launched a massive crackdown on political opponents, Jews, and resistance networks. By early 1942, thousands of people had been arrested and hundreds had faced direct execution. These public punishments were designed to send a clear message to the wider population: resistance meant death. On the 27th of May 1942, a daring assassination attempt took place in Prague. Czech resistance fighters attacked Heydrich's car, and a few days later, he died from his injuries. For the Nazi leadership, this was a severe shock. In the brutal reprisals that followed, Frank played a central role. Working with Heydrich's successor, he decided that the entire Czech population must be shown the cost of daring to strike at the Nazi state. The most infamous part of this revenge was the destruction of villages like Lidice and Ležáky. The men of these villages were lined up and shot, while many of the women were sent to concentration camps. Some children were separated for Germanization, while the rest were killed. This was not simply a military operation. It was a calculated demonstration of psychological terror. Frank knew the scale of his crimes and understood what would happen if he fell into Soviet hands. As the Red Army advanced toward Prague, he decided to surrender to the Americans instead. On the 9th of May 1945, he gave himself up to U.S. forces in the Pilsen area. His stay in American custody was only temporary. He was soon handed over to Czechoslovak authorities, who planned to put him on trial for war crimes. In 1946, proceedings against him began in Prague. Frank's defense was conducted by a Czech lawyer, a deeply humiliating detail for him. During the trial, the prosecution laid out the record of massacres, deportations, and destroyed villages. Cases like Lidice became permanently attached to his name. The evidence against him was overwhelming. There was no real escape. The court found him guilty of war crimes and atrocities and sentenced him to death. On the 22nd of May 1946, a scaffold was erected in the courtyard of Pankrác Prison in Prague. Outside, the surrounding streets were filled with people. Thousands, including many relatives of victims, came to witness the execution. This was not just punishment, it was a powerful moment of symbolic justice. The chosen method was the Hungarian pole hanging. In this procedure, the condemned person is attached to an upright pole, and death comes by slow strangulation. It is a highly visible and public form of execution. According to reports, widows from Lidice and relatives of many Czech victims sat in the front rows. Their faces showed no sympathy at all. Frank was brought to the scaffold wearing a ragged SS uniform. As the noose was adjusted around his neck, he spoke his final words, whose basic meaning was that Germany would live on even if they did not. Moments later, the mechanism was triggered and he was left hanging from the pole. The crowd watched the scene in silence. There was no noise, no mercy, only the realization that the man who had imposed years of terror on them was finally powerless. After the execution, his body was examined and then buried in an unmarked grave in Prague, so that his resting place could not become a site of pilgrimage. Karl Hermann Frank was a man whose entire career revolved around German supremacy and Nazi ideology. From Sudetenland politics to terror in the protectorate, he consistently used repression and fear as his primary weapons. His name will always be tied to Lidice and other destroyed villages. His story ended with a public execution, carried out in front of the very people on whom he had once shown no mercy. This case reminds us how state power combined with extremist ideology can produce horrific outcomes, but also that, sometimes, even if late, justice can still be reached.